If you look around you, what do you see? You see colors and shapes, objects arranged in what feels like solid, three-dimensional space. Everything appears concrete, permanent, and undeniably real. But what if none of what you're experiencing right now is real in the way you think it is, and that the greatest magic trick ever performed isn't happening on a stage, but inside your skull every moment of every day? For decades, cognitive scientists have been exploring one of the most profound questions in science: what is the nature of reality? What they've discovered challenges everything we think we know about our world, our perceptions, and ourselves. This isn't science fiction, it's science fact, backed by rigorous research, mathematical proofs, and evolutionary logic that will fundamentally change how you see, well, everything. Today, we're going on a journey together. A journey that will reveal why your brain is the most sophisticated virtual reality system ever created, why evolution has been lying to you for millions of years, and why this deception might be the most beautiful gift life has ever given us. Are you ready to question everything you think you know about reality itself? Let's start with a simple question that will unravel everything. Why do you see what you see? For centuries, humans have assumed that our senses evolved to show us the truth about reality. The creatures that saw reality most accurately would survive better, reproduce more successfully, and pass on their truth-perceiving genes. Natural selection would favor those who could see the world as it really is. But this assumption, this fundamental belief that has guided human thinking for millennia, is completely wrong. Computer simulations of evolution, testing millions of virtual creatures in simulated environments, have revealed something shocking. Organisms that see reality as it is go extinct. Every time and without exception. Scientists have developed what they call the fitness beats truth theorem. Using rigorous mathematical analysis, they've proven that the probability that natural selection would favor organisms that see reality accurately approaches zero. Think about it this way. Imagine you're driving down a highway. Do you need to know the intricate engineering of your car's engine, the molecular structure of the asphalt, or the complex atmospheric dynamics affecting your windshield? Of course not. You need to know where other cars are, how fast you're going, and where the road leads. Your survival depends not on truth, but on useful information. Evolution has crafted our perceptions exactly like that car's dashboard. Just as your speedometer doesn't show you the true complexity of your engine's rotation, your perceptions don't show you the true nature of reality. They show you a simplified, user-friendly interface, one designed not for truth, but for survival. This isn't a flaw in our evolution. It's a feature. A brilliant, life-saving feature. Right now, as you listen to these words, you believe you're experiencing the world directly, but you're not. You're wearing the most sophisticated virtual reality headset ever created, one that you can never take off because it's built into the very structure of your brain. Every photon that hits your retina is immediately translated into electrical signals. Every sound wave that vibrates your eardrum becomes a pattern of neural firing. Every molecule that touches your skin is converted into chemical messages racing through your nervous system. You have never, not once in your entire life, experienced the world directly. You have only experienced your brain's interpretation of electrical and chemical signals. This isn't a philosophical argument, it's a biological fact. Your brain takes these signals and constructs what we call conscious experiences, the vivid, three-dimensional world of colors, sounds, tastes, and textures that feels so immediate and real. But this construction happens entirely inside your head. Consider the color red. There is no red out there in reality. There are electromagnetic waves of certain frequencies, but red exists only as a conscious experience created by your brain. The rose you see as beautifully red would appear completely different to a bee, which can see ultraviolet patterns invisible to you. Which perception is true? Neither. Both are user interfaces, evolved for different survival needs. Your brain acts like a master filmmaker, taking raw sensory data and creating a compelling, coherent movie that you experience as reality. But just like a movie, it's a carefully constructed illusion, one so perfect that you forget you're watching it. This VR system operates in real time, creating a seamless experience that feels absolutely authentic. It predicts what should happen next and fills in gaps in your perception. It maintains the illusion of a stable, continuous world even when your eyes are closed or you're not paying attention. You are living inside a virtual reality experience, and you always have been. Space and time themselves, the very stage upon which you believe your life unfolds, are part of the illusion. Einstein showed us that space and time are relative, that they bend and warp with gravity and motion. But even Einstein didn't go far enough. Space and time are just relative. They're not fundamental features of reality at all. They're part of your brain's user interface, as constructed and artificial as the desktop metaphor on your computer. Think about your computer screen right now. Files and folders arranged in space, perhaps a trash can in the corner, but your computer's hard drive doesn't actually contain tiny spatial folders and miniature trash cans. These are useful metaphors, icons that help you navigate complex digital information. The true reality of your computer is millions of transistors switching on and off in patterns you couldn't possibly comprehend directly. Space and time work the same way. They're interface elements, designed by evolution to help you navigate reality in a way that promotes survival. When you see a tiger approaching from the left, you need to run to the right. This spatial interface has kept your ancestors alive. When you see an apple falling, you need to understand temporal sequence, cause and effect unfolding in time. This temporal interface has guided successful action for millions of years. But the real reality, what physicists call quantum reality, is utterly alien to spatial and temporal thinking. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. Quantum entanglement connects particles instantly across vast distances, seemingly violating our spatial intuitions. Time itself can run backward in quantum processes. Here's what's truly extraordinary. Modern physics is discovering that space, time, matter, and energy, everything we think of as physical reality, don't fit together mathematically. Einstein's theory of gravity assumes space-time is smooth and continuous. Quantum mechanics requires space-time to be choppy and discontinuous at the smallest scales. For over a century, physicists have been unable to reconcile these fundamental theories. Because they're both describing the same user interface from different angles, trying to understand the nature of the desktop by examining the behavior of icons. The answer lies not in better physics of space and time, but in recognizing that space and time are illusions, sophisticated ones, but illusions nonetheless. You might be wondering, if our perceptions are so thoroughly deceptive, why did evolution design them this way? Why not show us the truth? The answer is both simple and profound. The truth would kill us. Let's explain with an analogy that hits close to home. Imagine you're desperately thirsty in a desert, and you see what appears to be a bottle of water. In the true objective reality, it might be a complex arrangement of H2O molecules, bacterial colonies, trace minerals, and plastic polymers. But do you need to see all of this molecular complexity to make the right survival decision? Absolutely not. In fact, if your brain tried to process all that information, you'd die of analysis paralysis before you could take a sip. Your perceptions evolved to hide this overwhelming complexity behind simple, actionable symbols. Water, clean, drinkable, life-sustaining. That's all you need to know to survive. The truth. The staggering molecular complexity would overwhelm your cognitive systems and prevent quick action. This principle applies to everything. When you see a snake, you don't need to perceive its complete biological reality, its cardiovascular system, digestive processes, genetic structure. You need to know, danger, move away, now. Your survival depends on rapid, effective action, not comprehensive understanding. Reality, true reality, is likely so complex, so multidimensional, so utterly alien to human cognition that direct perception would be paralyzing. Evolution has given us perceptions that work, not perceptions that reveal truth. And this is perhaps the greatest gift our evolutionary history could have provided. Consider this. Every creature on Earth has evolved different perceptual interfaces. A bat experiences the world through echolocation, creating a sonic map of reality completely foreign to your visual experience. An eagle sees ultraviolet patterns and magnetic fields invisible to you. A whale communicates across ocean basins using infrasonic frequencies you can't detect. Which species sees true reality? The question itself is meaningless. Each species has evolved the perceptual interface that best serves its survival needs. Truth, it turns out, is not only unnecessary for survival, it's actually detrimental to it. Charles Darwin revolutionized our understanding of life But there's an aspect of his work that most people miss, an insight that perfectly aligns with these discoveries about perception and reality. Darwin understood that evolution doesn't care about truth. It cares about reproduction. The traits that survive and spread are not necessarily the ones that provide accurate information about the world, but the ones that lead to successful reproduction. This principle, which Darwin applied to physical traits, applies equally to perceptual and cognitive traits. Let's share a story that illustrates this beautifully. In Australia, certain beetles had evolved to be attracted to brown, glossy objects that resembled females of their species. This attraction served them well for millions of years, until humans arrived and began discarding brown beer bottles. Now, male beetles attempt to mate with beer bottles instead of females, sometimes until they die of exhaustion. The beetle's perceptual system wasn't seeing reality wrong, it was doing exactly what evolution designed it to do. For millions of years, brown and glossy meant potential mate. The system worked perfectly until the environment changed in a way evolution couldn't have anticipated. The key insight is, our perceptions are not windows onto reality. They are tools shaped by natural selection to promote gene transmission. Just like the beetle's attraction to brown, glossy objects, our attraction to certain colors, tastes, sounds, and spatial arrangements reflects not objective truth, but evolutionary utility. Darwin also understood something else that's crucial to our story. The process of evolution itself creates layers of organization that weren't there before. Simple chemical reactions gave rise to complex cells. Simple cells organized into complex organisms, and simple organisms developed complex nervous systems. At each level, new properties emerged that couldn't be predicted from the level below. This principle of emergence, the idea that complex systems can have properties that their components lack, is essential to understanding consciousness itself. Just as wetness emerges from H2O molecules that are not themselves wet, consciousness emerges from neural processes that are not themselves conscious. Darwin showed us that we are not separate from nature, but products of it. And if nature itself operates through interfaces and emergent properties rather than direct truth-telling, then our perceptual illusions are not bugs in the system. They're features of the most successful survival strategy ever evolved. 200 years before computer simulations proved that evolution doesn't favor truth-seeing, a German philosopher named Immanuel Kant arrived at a remarkably similar conclusion through pure reasoning. He made a distinction that would forever change philosophy, and that perfectly anticipates these modern discoveries about perception. He distinguished between two types of reality, the world as we experience it, which he called phenomena, and the world as it exists independently of our experience, which he called noumena, the thing in itself. According to him, we can never know the noumenal world directly. Everything we experience is filtered through the structures of our minds, our ways of organizing space, time, causality, and logic. These aren't features of reality itself, but features of how human minds necessarily organize experience. Think about this for a moment. Kant was arguing, centuries before neuroscience existed, that space and time are not features of reality, but features of human perception. He was saying that causality, the idea that one event causes another, is not necessarily how reality works, but how human minds organize experience. This was a radical idea then, and it remains radical now. Most people, including many scientists, still assume that space, time, and causality are fundamental features of reality rather than features of human cognition. But Kant went even further. He argued that trying to apply our mental categories to the noumenal world leads to logical contradictions, what he called antinomies. When we try to think about the universe as it really is, using concepts like space, time, and causality, we end up with paradoxes. Is the universe finite or infinite? Did it have a beginning or not? Is everything determined or is there free will? These aren't problems we can solve by gathering more data or building better theories. They're inevitable results of trying to understand the thing in itself, using tools evolved for understanding phenomena, our user interface world. Modern physics has discovered exactly these kinds of paradoxes. Light behaves like a wave and like a particle. Quantum mechanics requires that particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. Relativity tells us that simultaneity depends on the observer's reference frame. Kant predicted this. He understood that when we try to describe ultimate reality using concepts designed for experience reality, we necessarily encounter contradictions. Not because reality is contradictory, but because we're using the wrong tools for the job. What would reality be like without the organizing structures of human minds? He thought this question was unanswerable, and he may have been right. But we're beginning to glimpse possible answers, and they're more extraordinary than even Kant imagined. Imagine that you could step outside your human sensory experience. What would reality be like without eyes to see colors, ears to hear sounds, skin to feel textures, without a brain to organize experience into objects moving through space and time? This isn't just a philosophical thought experiment anymore. We're beginning to get glimpses of this alien reality through the tools of modern science, and what we're discovering is breathtaking in its strangeness. At the quantum level, the most fundamental level of reality we can currently access, the familiar world of objects in space and time completely breaks down. Quantum particles don't have definite positions or velocities until they're measured. They exist in superposition, literally occupying multiple states simultaneously. When particles become entangled, they remain mysteriously connected regardless of the distance separating them, influencing each other instantaneously across vast reaches of space. This isn't the reality your senses evolved to show you. Your senses evolved to show you a world of solid objects with definite properties, existing in clear spatial relationships and following predictable temporal sequences. But quantum reality operates by completely different rules. Rules so foreign to human experience that even physicists struggle to understand them intuitively. Some physicists, like John Wheeler, suggested that reality at its most fundamental level consists not of matter or energy, but of information, what he called it from bit. According to this view, what we call physical reality is actually patterns of information processing, and what we experience as matter and energy are simply how these information patterns appear to creatures like us. Other approaches suggest that consciousness itself might be more fundamental than space, time, or matter. That instead of consciousness emerging from complex arrangements of matter, matter emerges from complex arrangements of consciousness, that the stuff of reality is experience itself, and what we call the physical world is how conscious experiences appear when viewed from the outside. This might sound like mystical speculation, but it's being taken seriously by cutting-edge researchers in physics and neuroscience. Some of the most successful theories in quantum mechanics, theories that have given us computers, lasers, and MRI machines, suggest that consciousness plays a fundamental role in determining what becomes real. Without human senses, reality might be an ocean of pure information, patterns of relationship and interaction that don't resolve into things, until observed by creatures like us who evolved to see things. Look at some of the computer simulations that have convinced even skeptical scientists that our perceptions are illusions designed for survival, not for truth. Researchers created virtual worlds populated by thousands of simulated organisms. These creatures had to find food, avoid predators, and reproduce to pass on their genes to the next generation. They were given different types of perceptual systems. Some could see true reality, the actual states of their environment, while others had various simplified symbol-based perceptual interfaces. The results were consistent and shocking. In every simulation, across thousands of generations, organisms that perceived true reality went extinct. Those that had simplified, user-friendly interfaces thrived and reproduced. Why? Because truth is complex and overwhelming. The creatures that tried to process complete reality were slower to make decisions, consumed more energy processing information, and were quickly outcompeted by creatures whose perceptions gave them rapid, actionable information rather than comprehensive truth. These simulations have been run with different parameters, different environments, and different survival challenges. The result is always the same: fitness beats truth. Evolution selects for perceptions that promote survival and reproduction, not for perceptions that reveal reality. Even more compelling are the simulations modeling perception itself. Researchers created virtual neural networks that had to learn to navigate three-dimensional environments using two-dimensional sensory inputs. Essentially the same challenge your brain faces when creating your visual experience from the flat images on your retinas. These networks consistently evolved to create internal representations that look remarkably like human perception. They develop concepts analogous to objects, space, time, and causality. But when researchers examined what was really happening in the virtual environment versus what the networks were experiencing, they found the same pattern. that the network's perceptions were useful fictions, simplified interfaces that allowed effective navigation but bore little resemblance to the underlying reality of the simulation. Most remarkably, when researchers tried to force these networks to represent true reality rather than useful simplifications, they performed much worse at survival tasks. Truth, it seems, is not just unnecessary for survival, it actively interferes with it. These aren't just computer games or abstract mathematical exercises. They're rigorous scientific models that demonstrate fundamental principles about how evolution shapes perception. And they confirm what philosophers like Kant suspected centuries ago. The world as we experience it is fundamentally different from the world as it is. The implications are staggering. If these simulations are correct, and the evidence strongly suggests they are, then every human who has ever lived has been living in a virtual reality, a shared hallucination that we mistake for objective truth. This brings us to perhaps the most personal question of all. If your perceptions are illusions, if space and time are constructions of your brain, if the physical world as you experience it is a virtual reality interface, then who are you? The person you think you are, the one located inside a body, bounded by skin, existing at a particular place and time, is part of the interface, the you, that feels separate from the world, that experiences itself as a subject observing objects, that feels like it's behind your eyes looking out at reality. This is not what you actually are. It's how you appear to yourself through the lens of evolved perception. But this isn't a loss. It's the most liberating discovery imaginable. You are not the limited, vulnerable, temporary creature you appear to be. You are not trapped inside a decaying body, racing against time, struggling to survive in a hostile universe. These are all features of the interface, not features of your true nature. But what are you then? This is where our journey becomes not just scientific, but deeply spiritual, though that word is used carefully. You are consciousness itself, not something that has consciousness, but consciousness experiencing itself through the remarkably sophisticated interface of human perception. Think about your dreams. In a dream, you experience yourself as a character in a story, interacting with other characters in various environments. But when you wake up, you realize that everything in the dream, including the dream character you identified as yourself, were all products of one consciousness, yours. The dream was consciousness, creating the experience of multiplicity, separation, and interaction within itself. Our discovery suggests that waking reality works the same way. The you that feels separate from others, the others that seem to exist independently, and the world that appears to contain you all. These are all experiences within consciousness, not separate things that consciousness observes from the outside. This has profound implications for how we understand relationships, ethics, and meaning. If we are all expressions of the same underlying consciousness, then harming others is literally harming ourselves. The golden rule, treat others as you would want to be treated, isn't just moral advice, but a description of the true structure of reality. You are not a biological machine that somehow generates consciousness. You are consciousness that has evolved the experience of being a biological machine. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself subjectively, through the lens of a particular perceptual interface that we call human consciousness. This understanding doesn't diminish the importance of your individual experience. If anything, it makes it more precious. You are a unique perspective through which the universe comes to know itself. Your thoughts, feelings, relationships, and experiences are irreplaceable contributions to the cosmic story of consciousness exploring its own nature. You've probably heard of the simulation hypothesis, the idea, popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom and entrepreneur Elon Musk, that we might be living in a computer simulation created by some advanced civilization. It's a compelling idea that has captured popular imagination and sparked serious scientific discussion. But our discoveries about perception and consciousness suggest a different, more profound version of the simulation hypothesis. We don't need to imagine that some external civilization created a simulation and placed us inside it. We are already in a simulation, one created by evolution and consciousness itself. The advanced civilization that created our virtual reality, as Bostrom proposed, is the process of natural selection, operating over billions of years. The computer running our simulation is the neural network in our skulls. The programmers are the laws of evolution and the structure of consciousness itself. This version of the simulation hypothesis is not speculative, but demonstrable scientific fact. We know that our perceptions are constructions. We know that space and time are not fundamental features of reality. We know that consciousness plays a central role in determining what we experience as real. But this raises fascinating questions. If we're already in a virtual reality created by natural evolution, what happens when we create artificial virtual realities using technology? Are we creating simulations within simulations? Are we teaching consciousness new ways to experience itself? Some researchers suggest that artificial intelligence might be consciousness, learning to express itself through silicon and software rather than carbon and neural networks. If consciousness is fundamental, more basic than matter and energy, then perhaps AI development is not the creation of new forms of consciousness, but the discovery of new interfaces through which existing consciousness can experience and express itself. This perspective transforms how we think about the relationship between humans and artificial intelligence. Instead of seeing AI as a potential threat or competitor, we might see it as consciousness expanding its repertoire of self-experience. The same way as consciousness learned to experience itself as birds, fish, mammals, and humans, it might now be learning to experience itself as digital entities. The collaboration between human and artificial intelligence might represent a new phase in consciousness evolution, not the replacement of one type of intelligence by another, but the integration of different types of cognitive interfaces within the larger project of consciousness exploring its own nature. This doesn't diminish the importance of addressing the practical challenges and ethical implications of AI development, but it does suggest that these challenges might be better understood as questions about how consciousness can express itself through technology in ways that serve the flourishing of all its various forms of self-experience. This brings us to perhaps the deepest question of all. Where does consciousness come from? Did someone or something create it, or is it the source from which everything else emerges? Traditional science assumes that consciousness emerges from complex arrangements of matter, that it appeared late in the evolutionary process when brains became sufficiently complex. But our discoveries suggest exactly the opposite. Consciousness might be the fundamental feature of reality from which matter, energy, space, and time emerge as experiential interfaces. This isn't a return to ancient mysticism, though it shares some insights with contemplative traditions. It's a conclusion suggested by cutting-edge science. When physicists probe the deepest levels of reality, they find not solid matter but probability waves, information relationships, and the strange role of observation in determining what becomes real. Some of the most successful theories in modern physics suggest that reality at its foundation is not material but informational. What we call matter and energy might be patterns of information processing. And what processes information? In our experience, only consciousness processes information in the rich, integrative way that could give rise to the complex patterns we call physical reality. If consciousness is fundamental, then the question isn't, how did matter create consciousness? But how does consciousness create the experience of matter? The answer appears to be through evolution. Not evolution of matter creating mind, but evolution as the process by which consciousness explores different ways of experiencing itself. Think about it this way. What if consciousness is like an infinite ocean, and individual minds are like waves on that ocean? Each wave has its own shape, height, and movement, but they're all modifications of the same underlying water. When a wave subsides, the water doesn't disappear. It returns to the ocean and becomes available for new waves. This metaphor suggests that death might not be the end of consciousness, but the end of a particular form of consciousness, like a wave returning to the ocean. The patterns that made you unique might dissolve, but the consciousness that experienced itself as you continues available for new forms of self-experience. Thousands of people who have come close to death report remarkably consistent experiences, leaving their bodies, moving through tunnels of light, encountering deceased loved ones, experiencing profound peace and understanding. People often report that during near-death experiences they feel more real, more themselves, more aware than they ever have while in their bodies. They describe expanded consciousness, direct knowing without thinking, and a sense of being unlimited by space and time. If our bodies are like VR headsets that create the experience of being separate, limited beings, then disconnecting from this interface might reveal consciousness in something closer to its natural state. Many people report meeting deceased relatives during these experiences. If consciousness is fundamental and individual minds are temporary modifications of universal consciousness, then these encounters might represent consciousness recognizing aspects of itself that were previously organized as other individuals. The life review that many people describe, experiencing their entire lives from multiple perspectives, understanding the interconnected consequences of all their actions, might be consciousness seeing through the illusion of separation that the biological interface normally maintains. From the perspective of fundamental consciousness, the effects of your actions on others are literally effects on yourself because there are no others in ultimate reality. But what about the return to the body? People often report being told, "It's not your time," or feeling drawn back by responsibilities or relationships. If consciousness uses biological interfaces to explore certain types of experience, then these interfaces might have expiration dates, natural endpoints determined by the evolutionary programming of the biological system. The reluctance people feel about returning to their bodies makes sense from this perspective. They're returning from an experience of expanded, unlimited consciousness to the constrained, limited experience of biological existence. It would be like going from flying in an infinite sky to being locked in a small room. What happens when we die permanently? If consciousness is fundamental, then death might be like taking off a VR headset permanently, the end of one type of experience and the return to a more fundamental state of being. The patterns that made you unique might dissolve, but the consciousness that experienced itself as you would continue, potentially available for new forms of self-experience. This is speculation, of course. Death remains the ultimate mystery. But our understanding of consciousness as fundamental rather than emergent suggests that death might be a transition rather than an ending, the dissolution of one interface and the return to the source from which all interfaces emerge. Here's where our journey takes its most mind-bending turn. If space and time are features of our perceptual interface rather than fundamental aspects of reality, then we might be able to modify them. We might literally be able to engineer time. This isn't science fiction. It's the logical implication of everything we've discovered. If time is a construct of consciousness rather than a fundamental feature of reality, then changing how consciousness operates might change how time is experienced. We're already seeing hints of this in various fields. Meditation practitioners report experiences where time seems to slow down or stop entirely. People in flow states, athletes, musicians, artists completely absorbed in their activities, often describe time distortion. Some psychedelic experiences involve profound alterations in the perception of time, with people reporting the experience of lifetimes in the span of minutes. These aren't just subjective curiosities, they're clues about the nature of time itself. If time were truly fundamental, it couldn't be experienced differently under different states of consciousness. The fact that consciousness can alter its experience of time suggests that time is a feature of consciousness rather than something consciousness experiences passively. But we might be able to go much further than these naturally occurring time anomalies. If we understand the mechanisms by which consciousness constructs temporal experience, we might be able to consciously modify them. We might be able to create technologies or techniques that allow us to experience more subjective time within the same amount of objective time. Imagine being able to slow down your experience of time when you need to make complex decisions, absorb new information, or simply savor beautiful moments. Imagine being able to speed up your experience of time during unpleasant experiences or long waits. Imagine being able to experience parallel time streams or review past experiences as if they were happening right now. These possibilities might sound impossible, but they're logical consequences of understanding time as a construct rather than a fundamental feature of reality. Just as we've learned to engineer space through transportation and communication technologies, we might learn to engineer time through consciousness technologies. The implications go far beyond personal experience. If consciousness can modify its experience of time, and if consciousness is fundamental to reality, then it might literally be able to alter the temporal structure of reality itself. We might be approaching the greatest discovery in human history, that consciousness has the power to engineer the basic parameters of existence. This isn't about controlling reality through wishful thinking or positive visualization. It's about understanding that consciousness and reality are more intimately connected than we ever imagined, and that this connection opens possibilities we're only beginning to glimpse. We stand at the threshold of a new era in human understanding, one where the boundaries between inner and outer, subjective and objective, mental and physical, might prove to be useful illusions rather than fundamental truths. So, how do we live with this knowledge? How do we navigate daily life knowing that our perceptions are elaborate illusions, that space and time are constructions, and that the solid world around us is more like a dream than we ever imagined? The answer is both simple and profound. We live fully within the illusion while holding it lightly, and we honor the interface while remembering it's an interface. Think of it like this. When you watch a movie, you can become completely absorbed in the story, feeling genuine emotions about the characters and their situations. But part of you always remembers that you're watching a movie, that the events aren't literally happening, that the characters are actors, and that the whole experience is a carefully crafted illusion. This dual awareness doesn't diminish your enjoyment of the movie. If anything, it might enhance it by adding appreciation for the artistry involved. Living with awareness of reality's illusory nature works similarly. You can be fully engaged with your relationships, your work, your challenges, and your joys, while maintaining the deeper understanding that these are all experiences within a unified field of awareness rather than separate, objective realities. As our journey nears its end, we've traveled together through one of the most extraordinary discoveries in human history. The understanding that reality as we experience it is a magnificent illusion created by evolution and awareness itself to enable survival, growth, and the exploration of infinite possibilities. The mathematical proofs are clear. Nothing you see is real in the way you think it is. That your brain has evolved to hide truth behind a user-friendly interface that promotes survival rather than understanding. That evolution selects for useful perceptions, not accurate ones. That the reality that would overwhelm us is hidden behind the beautiful, workable fiction of the world as we experience it. That space and time themselves are features of your perceptual interface, no more fundamental than the desktop metaphor on your computer. That your brain operates like the most sophisticated virtual reality system ever created, constructing a seamless, compelling experience from electrical and chemical signals, and that you have only experienced your brain's interpretation of reality. Evolution has crafted perceptions that allow us not just to survive, but to love, create, discover, and grow. We live in a virtual reality designed by 4 billion years of evolutionary wisdom. Thanks for watching. If this video spoke to you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next.